Good, good evening, everyone, and welcome to IKG's Wisdom Wednesday for February 2024. We are so happy that you are here and joining us this evening. As always, we'd like to start out by acknowledging who all is in the room with us tonight. So we're going to shout out a few cities and say, hey, thank you and welcome for joining us. We have Georgia in the house, San Diego, California, family from, of course, DC, Jacksonville, North Carolina. We have Maryland in the house. Again, Georgia's in the house heavy. Welcome, Georgia. We have Fairborn, Georgia, Clarenceville, Georgia. Welcome, welcome. Chicago is in the house. Brooklyn. We have Alaska. Hey, welcome from Alaska. Thank you for joining us. Virginia Beach is in the house. California again, Brooklyn, New York, Central California, Atlanta, Georgia. All right, and we have family continuing to come in. So as you're coming in, welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Sister Adjoa, and I am the IKG Wisdom Wednesday coordinator, and we're very blessed and thankful that you are joining us this evening. For those who may be new, Wisdom Wednesday is a free monthly lecture series that we hold every third Wednesday, where we bring in various speakers to present on topics related to Black history, culture, spirituality, economics, education, just a variety of topics that are reflective and beneficial to Black people and that meet our interests. So we are here today for another great program. To learn more about IKG, we invite you to go to ikgculturalresourcecenter.com to learn more about our various programming, including our upcoming study tour to Egypt taking place in July of 2024, as well as the Egypt on the Potomac field trips, which will begin in April of 2024, and tickets are now on sale for those field trips, which generally sell out. So we definitely encourage you to go to our website and purchase tickets. And again, we do have the Egypt on the Potomac field trips that take place from April through November. So we hope to see you on one of our trips. So tonight, we are very pleased to welcome our presenter, Nakaja X, who will be presenting on Play the Game, Hierarchical Assimilation. This presentation will discuss the book, Play the Game, Hierarchical Assimilation, a groundbreaking academic book that delves into the perils of society and how to navigate it to find collective freedoms. Written by Nakaja, an international scholar, entrepreneur, and writer, this book offers a unique perspective on the interconnected systems of oppression that shape our world. With over 600 pages of carefully researched and thought-provoking content, this book takes readers on a journey through history, exploring the roots of power structures, such as the military-industrial complex and educational institutions. The book also examines the ways in which these structures perpetuate inequities and restrict individual freedoms, making it a must-read for anyone interested in social justice, activism, liberation, and political change. Tonight's presentation will provide practical solutions through actionable steps to navigate and resist the forces of oppression that permeates our society. This will be an informative and empowering session, providing you with tools to affect real change in the world. A little bit about our speaker. Nakaja X holds a bachelor's degree in anthropology and international development with a concentration in African and Asian affairs, and is pursuing a master's in anthropological studies in final pursuit of her JD PhD. In addition to her academic pursuits, Nakaja is an accomplished writer and children's book author. Her love of travel has led her to gain in-depth perspectives of other cultures and outlooks of society, which she incorporates into her work to inspire and educate readers of all ages. With an Afrocentric approach to her analysis and publications, Nakaja has garnered global recognition for her insightful research on institutionalized oppression and effective counteractive strategies. Her work has earned her numerous invitations to speak at prestigious conferences and events worldwide. As a social entrepreneur, Nakaja has founded both a nonprofit organization promoting academic excellence for youth through international travel and social and wealth empowerment, and a for-profit business focused on renewable energy solutions. Through these ventures, she has become a trailblazer in the fields of sustainability, education, and innovation. Nakaja's commitment to effect positive change in the world serves as an inspiration to many, and her academic and entrepreneurial achievements continue to set her apart as a leader in her field. So as we get started for tonight, I would like to remind you that you can interact with the program through our chat. At the end of the program, we will have a Q&A session, and we ask that any questions that you have for our presenter, that you place those specific questions in the Q&A box. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Sister Nakaja.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I want to thank Anthony Browder for extending the invite for IKG Wednesdays. I'm so excited to be able to be in your presence and talk to you guys about my work, my literature. I'm so excited to see so many people from so many different places. That's really fun. So I see you guys are engaged. I hope you guys remain engaged and ask me as many questions as you want. I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. So my book is called Play the Game, Hierarchical Assimilation. I worked really hard on this manuscript since 2019, and I'm so excited to finally be able to share it with you guys. So I'm going to go over the contents of how this presentation is going to go in the beginning. First, I'm going to let you guys know a little bit more about me. I know that was a robust introduction, but just going to get into what prompted me to write Play the Game, Hierarchical Assimilation. And we're going to break down what Play the Game is, my indoctrination, and what hierarchical structures are. We're going to break those things down and think through them together. And then we're going to look at a few case studies that I pick out, the biggest ones that I found most prevalent in my writing, that has the most impact. And then finally, we're going to get to the solutions that I bring up in the book as well, and talk a bit about imagination. And then we'll finally trail it right back into the book again, like where you can find it. So my name is Nakaja X. I am because we are. So I really believe in this concept of Ubuntu, which is quoting I am because we are, I exist because of my community around me. And something that really brings about Play the Game, hierarchical assimilation is the power of narrative building. So I believe that it is imperative to be able to document our experiences that we have in this world, because as Zora Neale Hurston says, they'll cause you pain and then say that you enjoyed it, and kill you essentially, and say that you enjoyed that death. And so what I take from that as someone who is a fan of Zora Neale Hurston's work as an anthropologist is being certain that I'm documenting my experiences. And so in my book, I start off by doing that from middle school, right? So there's one of the first chapters that you're going to see is me talking about my experience being at Howard University Middle School. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. And so another big piece you should know about me is from the book, you should take from it that I'm using narrative building to be disruptive within our system, to reimagine what our system should look like. So disruption through imagination, right? And using our imagination to create the realities that we want. But we can't do that if we don't have the correct infrastructure. So this is a foundational piece to understand my positionality. I just want to take some time to acknowledge the image. These are my actual ancestors from, I want to say, the 1830s, 1840s. I'm able to have an image of them. And I just want to share that my work is really because of them, and also wanting to leave a legacy for my children to understand the power of imagining and ideas and planning and writing and organizing and all those different things. And so I relate that back to my heritage. So that is the background. So this concept of play the game, what comes to mind when I say play the game? Have you guys ever heard this phrase before? I'm gonna be looking in the chat to get some responses. Because I'm going to talk a bit more as to why I titled it Play the Game from my own experience, but I'm curious to know, have you guys ever heard that phrase before? Heard it be said to you? And what comes to mind immediately when I'm getting a lot of yeses, so what comes to mind immediately when you guys hear it? It's a lot of yeses. It's a turnoff. Yes, to play the game means to play along in the system, playing the game, blend in, right? So this is all the things that do come up with it. And the reason why I titled it Play the Game is because it was something that was inherently pushed into me when I was in the military. I was actually in the Air Force, a second lieutenant at USAFA, United States Air Force Academy. And that was a common narrative that they pushed on African women, to play this game, keep your head down within this racist infrastructure. That's where I heard it the most. But I definitely heard it a lot within the schooling system. And so just to go into my indoctrination, I was initially growing up educated in the South. And then I would later on move to DC, where I would become re-indoctrinated at Howard University Middle School in Washington, DC, which was an amazing experience because of the faculty members during the time that I was at Howard University Middle School. They very much so made it very Afrocentric curriculum. So I was learning not only about all of the nations in Africa, but African people on a global scale, and our issues and how we need to come together at a very, very young age. And so those seeds were planted in me that allows for me to grow into this person that I'm becoming today, which goes back to Ubuntu. And then later on, I would go to Benjamin Banneker across the street for our DC folks. And that experience was really interesting because it was at the older building at the time that I went. So it very much had a feel for a school to prison pipeline, just because of the institution building, specifically of having metal detectors, for example. So that wasn't a great experience, and it's not good for the psyche as a young person. And so I would transfer to School Without Walls, which would be a bit more freer as far as navigating in the academic space, not having to go through meta detectors, but way more Eurocentric when it comes to what we're learning about world history, obviously. And so they're dumbing education down in a very systematic way at schools that was, I would say, it's not challenging, it's dimming your imagination in a lot of different ways, at least to me. And later on, I would go to different PWIs like USAFA, Georgetown, George Washington, and then in that would be able to study at global universities like Al Akhawain University in Morocco, and also School for International Training in Vietnam. But the most important education that I got was my self-education, the education I received by being intellectually curious, and asking myself, how did this become to be? Like, why is this like this? And then doing my own research, seeking answers. That's the best education that I have been able to receive. So I say all this to say, during our thinking about our indoctrination, thinking about our kids' indoctrination, be aware of the effort you have to put into your own education and your own indoctrination of finding answers despite systems and curriculums that are pushed in front of you. And to the left is an image that's actually in my book. I received this image from the Library of Congress. So there's a lot of different images in my book like this that predates the copyrights laws. And I'll read out the quote if you guys can't read it. It's three kids sitting together and they say, "Yeah, but did you guys ever stop to realize if they let us go to their schools, we're liable to wind up just as confused as those governors and judges?" So just to think about our education. So another piece I want us to think about is hierarchical structures. What comes up when you guys think of hierarchical structures? And so I would love for you guys to answer that in the chat, but I'm going to also continue going into what I mean by assimilation while I wait for some of your guys' responses. So the reason why I am emphasizing hierarchical structures is because I want us to really think through power systems that are in play in our everyday lives, right? So we have, of course, the racial capitalist structure that creates this socioeconomic ladder and gap between the poor and the wealthy, but we also have hierarchical structures in our day-to-day lives, maybe within the household, maybe at work, maybe in school. All of these structures are embedded within our interactions because of the system that it's predicated on. And with that, I want us to think about the cultural assimilation that comes into place with that. And so I'm going to read out this definition of cultural assimilation for you guys, which is specifically pertains to the process by which individuals or groups adopt the cultural norms, values, and behaviors of the dominant or majority culture within a society, often leading to a loss or dilution of their own cultural identity. I got a few responses. Let's see. Someone says, okay, I got a few. The unspoken rules: do what you got to do to get ahead. The book, The Game of Life and How to Play It years ago. To play the game, we must know the rules of the game. African proverb: the child that asks questions will become a fool. Okay, someone else says racial hierarchy: the small group of families that rule all of USA out of the public knowledge. Our invisible caste system. Yes, I have read that. It's a really good one. There are hierarchical, the systems in our own, should we seek it culturally? Yeah. Okay, so you guys have some ideas as to what hierarchical structures are. So this is a common theme that runs within the narratives that I'm describing within the book of different hierarchical structures that I come into play with as an African woman going within the education system, into these PWIs, into the workforce and beyond, of you trying to navigate and find solutions out of them. So for the case studies, I pulled out 3 ones I wanted to briefly go over. For the first one, I discuss my experience at the Air Force Academy, which had a lot of racialization within the militarization that happened there. For me, as one of the few African people within my squadron in my chain of command, I was very much harassed and isolated by them. And so I received a lot of Form 10s for silly things that I constantly had to respond to with memorandums in 2018, where I would have been 18 essentially, and having to navigate this system within the military that I wasn't familiar with, and trying to figure it out as soon as possible. And so a lot of times when injustices in the military do happen to African people, they do not document it or want to challenge it because they want to play the game, essentially, is what happens. So me challenging the Air Force as to what they were doing and their protocols became a big issue for them, that they basically wanted to put my responses, my documentations of what was happening in my squadron under the rug. And so I'm going to read out this snippet of this memorandum. And one of I don't have this memorandum in my book, but I have a different memorandum I put in my book that I'm responding to the Air Force. And I say, the root cause of the defaming, exaggerated, and false allegations stems from a stigma that every African-American female has an attitude. This allegation can be protested and represented by many other African-American cadets whom have coincidentally been labeled as having an attitude or lacking motivation. Alongside upperclassmen in CS30 has demonstrated bad leadership through the actions of power trips rather than communicating and understanding situations. And so the whole idea was every African woman that was in the Air Force Academy during the time I was there, which was very few. Let's say if there's about 1,000 cadets initially, there'd probably be, I don't know, 10 to 15 African women in it. So all the African women would have similar experiences as far as being harassed by cadet leadership or the chain of command in several different ways, having these illogical responses to like our hair policies, saying that we have an attitude, having all these stereotypes being plastered on us and being targeted for it. And we get rated in the military. So it is a big deal, and it does impact you psychologically when you're isolated. So I describe a lot of that in the book, and describing it in a way where it touches on how it impacts your psyche, but also strips away at your identity of self. So that's one case study that I talk about. And then another one is when I worked for a client, I had DC House of Planning that I was working with, and we worked on the comprehension plan in 2019. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the comprehension plan, but this was really an interesting and eye-opening experience for me, because the comprehension plan was essentially something that was wrote out in the 90s and in the 80s, and it's basically a plan to figure out what are we going to do at Washington, D.C., how are we going to gentrify it, how are we going to make it more money, essentially. But they positioned it in 2019 in a way where it's like, well, we believe in equity and we want all you guys, the natives, to stay in DC, but we also want 15,000 new people from outside, immigrants, to come into DC as well and pay for these high rises. So it's like, how is that going to work, that you want to balance keeping the natives here at an affordable price while also influxing in more people and creating more high rises? It doesn't really make sense, right? And so when I was able to work with the community members, go into predominantly Ward 7 and Ward 8, we were tasked with understanding what was the headspace of the community members. What did they think about the comprehension plan? It wasn't so much to change anything about the comprehension plan. It was very much so to inform them that, hey, this is going out. You have the option of writing something against the comprehension plan if you want to, but it's going to happen regardless, right? So we're just here to get your opinion on it, but we're not going to change it. So that was very astounding, because when I was in Ward 7 and Ward 8 of Washington, D.C., a lot of the local people that had lived in Washington, D.C. from the 50s and 60s and 70s would show up, and they're like, hey, this isn't something new. We've seen this comprehension plan before. We know what you guys are trying to do. This is shenanigans. So it started to become less of listening to this authority, the government officials of the DC House of Planning, and more of reorganizing amongst each other to figure out, this is what they're doing, but this is our problems and this is our solutions, and this comp plan is not going to resolve it. And so one of the problems that they brought up was not having enough grocery stores in Ward 7 and Ward 8. And one of the solutions someone else brought up in the meetings was to basically create food cooperatives again, or start growing your own food, essentially. And so I witnessed being part of the DC House of Planning space that they wanted to figure out a way to reorganize the people so that wouldn't happen again. So they wouldn't be able to organize in a radical manner to start getting people to talk and be like, oh no, we need grocery stores. Like they wanted to figure out a way to get people to become complacent in that space. And so that triggered me to understand systemic racism in a different light that it showed up in the military, or that we've seen even in the past, because this is more governmental policies that we're talking about, racial policies that they have. And I remember having a co-worker of mine actually say, well, they're not even writing in proper English anyway, so we don't need to care about what they're saying about the comprehension plan. So that was the kind of positionality that these people were showing up in when we're supposed to be serving the people. It was quite the opposite with the agenda of the comprehension plan. So I encourage you guys to learn more about the comprehension plan if you live in DC and you don't know about it. But that experience is also documented in what I wrote to the government concerning that, because I was working on that project and I felt it was wrong. And another case study that shows up in my book that I won't get too much in detail about is COVID-19. I started my book in 2019, and the reason why it took me until last year to publish my book, 2023, was because so much was happening during COVID. I was like, I can't let it go yet. I got to keep documenting what's happening. So much was going on at that time. So yeah, it's very detailed with a lot of different case studies. To the left, you're going to see another image that you'll find in my book. Under it says colored volunteer. Okay, so for the solutions, the biggest thing that I talk about for solutions is reinforcing this idea of the power of imagination. Because first, change comes with our minds, us being able to imagine. And the reason why I find that so pervasive and like potent is because I experienced it. I imagined a world and an organization that talked about these challenges that we're having. There's so many of them, but I also wanted to be a part of it and tackling it from my own narrative, right? And so that came out with me developing the organization, the United Association of Moors, which is a social enterprise. We work on building curriculum, where I have taught over 300 students since 2019, teaching them on social and wealth empowerment. So we go over a good curriculum on discussing African history and also wealth empowerment as far as how to invest your money, how to compound your money, all those good things that are going to be proactive, teaching them and informing them on entrepreneurship, but also community building. And that also gets into collective action, not only on the local scale, but on the global scale. How can we network and come together as a people to resolve solutions? Something that has been very important for me and is the primary reason why I have traveled so much, is because of my drive to want to engage and build with other people who are having similar experiences. And Yeah, narrative building is also an important one. So I do encourage people to document their stories because everyone has a beautiful story. If anyone knows me, I do narrative building talks on LinkedIn every other week. And it's really beautiful because we get people from all over the world to come and talk about the power of storytelling. And it's really essential that we control our narrative and we control our story and we share it to the next generation. Otherwise, they won't know. And so, going back to that quote of Zora Neale Hurston, if you are silent about your pain, they will kill you and say you enjoyed it. So, this is a quote from page 17 from the book, going back to imagination. Imagination, the power of imagination, ideation, thought, vision, the power of symbolism and words cultivates a path to translate ideation into action. This manifests into a multitude of personal, sociocultural, and physical forms. Ideas become patterns of social attitudes, relations, and organizations, which impact abilities and inabilities. Knowledge is the product of ideation interacting with reality. Knowledge is power, and ideas are powerful because they become compelling. They induce societies into a state of consciousness conducive to the achievement of communal self-interest. Ideology legitimates power systems, hierarchical social structures, and relations through its provision of rationales and justification for the exercise of power. So I am saying that quote because it's really important for us to understand that we live in a racial capitalist system because someone imagined it, right? And so this image is showing you a snippet of someone's imagination as it pertains to that, right? Being able to exploit and conquer the Black man, and that is symbolism for conquering and disrupting the home, because if you target the man, you're targeting the family unit, which is very important, right? But also taking pieces away of the African nation. Someone imagined these things. So the whole thing I want us to think about, though, if someone can imagine exploitation and imagine these systems of oppression, can't we reimagine ourselves out of it? The answer is, of course. This is another image that we'll be seeing, showing lynching as an issue that is still an issue to this day. I recently did an article on a mutilation that happened to several Black bodies in Ringgold, Louisiana, where they were found mutilated on white property by dogs, and that was last year in November. So getting this concept of this racial capitalist system being predicated on the violence of people bodies, but particularly African bodies, because that is the foundation of the Western society that we live in. So, and then catapulting us to reimagine ourselves in this image of greatness, of great leadership, of community building, essentially. And again, all these images are available in my book, excuse me, again. And so, yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. I'm excited to hear your questions so we can dive in a little bit more. You can find that book at www.nkosi-a.com. And there's also my email if you have any further questions. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see some questions coming up. So please define PWI. PWI. The PWI is predominantly white institute. Sorry about that.
So I am going to ask everyone if you can begin to post your questions in the Q&A box, and we will ask them of our presenter. And as the questions are coming in, I'm going to start off with a couple of questions. And excuse me, the first question, can you speak more to what you mean by assimilation and playing a game? What does that mean for you? And in terms of, you said you've heard that throughout your educational career. What does that mean, and how how do you think we as Black people should reinterpret that concept?
So the reason why I am bringing up the concept of play the game, because I recognize that it's something that is ingrained in us at a very young age. So, for example, something that they would tell us at Howard University Middle School was you had to work. I don't even know. I don't know if they said 2 times or 10 times as harder as the white person when it came to getting work done and your academics and anything that you're doing, right? But that idea of having to play the game in a way that makes it seem like you always have to be better than. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I know it's a common saying amongst at least the Africans that have been socialized in America. And so I'm identifying that that's wrong. We don't need to play this game because we need to recreate and reimagine our own rules and our own games, essentially. But I'm describing the issues in playing that game and what happens with trying to assimilate within this hierarchical structure. It strips away at your cultural identity. It negates your own norms and values, and it goes against your nature as far as community building and trying to work for your own independence and self-reliance as a collective, essentially. So that's where I'm going with it, but I'm calling it out directly because it's something that everyone's doing for the most part, unless you're doing like engaging community work. If you're working for the government, and that's all you're doing, you're not actually engaging with your community outside of that parameter. You are playing the game because this government does not protect your interest as an African person or otherwise socialized in the system, because it's predicated on racial capitalism, which is violent. Right. So unless we're building our own institutions, we are building our own systems together as a collective, we are playing that game. And so there's an issue in that. So with cultural assimilation, basically your identity is erased, which has happened in some ways when we're thinking through Black identity.
Thank you. TJ Singleton asked, can you expand on the power structure roots? The roots of power structure?
The roots of power structure? Can you expand upon the question, like in general, like where does power come from, or like what do you mean by that?
So TJ, if you can add on to your question, but I would say if you want to start taking it, I think in that direction, like the roots of the power structure here in the United States, the roots of the hierarchical power structure that we experience. If you want to expand and talk a little bit more about that, perhaps that's where the question was going.
Right. I would say the roots, that's a really interesting, what I will say as far as the American power structure, we know that it was built on an economic system, right? So the reason why power does exist, or when we're thinking about sovereignty, for example, someone being able to have sovereignty and we're thinking about power, we have to think about their ability to enact violence in order to create their ruling system, right? So first comes violence a lot of times when we're thinking about nation state formations and things of that sort with sovereignty. And then of course, nation states have to make money. So then it goes into that economic structure of power. And essentially with America, the United States of America, it was built on the bodies of people as property. So that gave them power as well from an economic stance of looking at bodies as people and getting free labor, essentially. But we're able to maintain and regain our power back by not acquiescing to the system, not giving into the system, not assimilating into that system. So continuously being disruptive towards it, or continuously reimagining and rebuilding against it collectively. But first we have to organize ourselves in order to get there. But if you expand upon your question, I can target it more succinctly. Um, okay, so I guess Michael, I'm sorry, Ajua, did he expand upon that or?
No, the person hasn't expanded upon their question. So we're going to continue on and
Okay.
just build upon what your response. And if you could speak to some of the organizations that you have created and talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll come to Michael's question.
Okay, great. Um, yeah, so the main organization, I'm sorry if you guys can see me, my screen. So the main organization that I have founded is the United Association of Moors and also MoorSerp. So for United Association of Moors, I started in 2019 with the original idea of creating a database, which is still ongoing, but it went into more so education. So right now I've been running our educational, this will be the 4th year that we run our educational program on social and wealth empowerment, but we also do partnerships. So we have partnerships with people in Kenya and also in Nigeria and Ghana doing work as far as running programs on either history or wealth empowerment. And I also have partnerships with a technology company called Sadache and then SNMCAT, where we do social innovations there within the tech field. And yeah. And Michael asked the
Yes.
question, it's through my experience of talking to friends, family, coworkers who are African American, that very few I know talk about travel to Africa. The plans are to Hawaii, Paris, London, Spain, Rome, but they tend to frown on travel to the motherland. Your response. So yeah, I think more people, at least in my circle, my social circle, more people are traveling to African countries, and I hope that that is expanded upon. And I think because in the coming years, like at least since 2018, there has been some really great marketing around traveling to Africa. It's shifted. The narrative has shifted traveling to Africa. As you can see, you don't always see those negative images, especially with technologies like Instagram and Facebook. People are able to document their experiences traveling. People are able to do more research and find it. So I think my main thing would be is I hope people do not shy away from traveling to African countries and nations, because I think it's a very beautiful place and you get to learn so much about culture and people, which I think is very imperative. But I will say that I have heard of people have negative comments or have hold negative stereotypes about traveling to Africa, but those are immediately debunked once you step foot there and you start to realize, okay, it's not what I saw, it's not what I had thought. Because a lot of times we do have a lot of mental slavery going on when we think about the motherland, essentially. So I would encourage just to inquire, to seek more, and to actually go out and do it and discover the world, because you don't have to just limit yourself, right?
Okay, great. Our next question from Mona Cherie. She asked if you've been exposed to the works of Dr. Claude Anderson, who speaks on building our own systems in all areas of living. Also, are you familiar with Dr. Frances Cress Welsing? And if so, can you speak a little bit to their works and how they may have influenced you?
Yeah, so I am heavily influenced like from a lot of people like Sister Soja, Dr. Claude Anderson, um, Anime, Francis Welsing as well, Amos and Wilson, so many different people. My bibliography is very long of the people that I end up using: Kwame Ture, Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere. Like I'm not only do I take from leaders within the African American community, but also African leaders in general, because a lot of times they did work coincide together. So and also that was the work that I was exposed to at a very young age in middle school. So definitely with Francis Welsing's work. Also Ivan Van Sertima, I use him in the beginning too. They came before Columbus just to get us to understand that we are global people as well. Dr. Claude Anderson talks a lot about the economic piece, which is very influential for me because I do believe that it leaves a great pathway for us to get to where we need to do economically, not only on a local or national scale, but on a global scale of building our economic system. So certainly. And I also like go to Sankofa a lot. So a lot of the readers and books I have access to easily, which is why I'm also into building like an African Center database, because I want other people to have it easy to have access to people, because I was blessed to live in DC where this information is there, it's prevalent, it's within our community, but that's not true for a lot of places across America. So definitely influenced by all of my ancestors, Marcus Garvey, everyone. So great question.
Okay, so thank you. Ajay has a couple of questions. The first one is talking about connections to Kenya. If you're looking to travel to Kenya or Tanzania to help out with local Black-owned farms, what would be some reliable ways to connect to Kenyan farmers? Or how would you suggest one connect to Kenyan farmers? And then also, well, we can start there, then I'll go to the second question.
I actually know a few farmers in Ghana and also Tanzania, but the connection I had in Kenya is more dealing with like safaris, environmental things, because I am working out a program, international program for students, particularly. But it's definitely possible because when I was in, where was I? When I was in Arusha, Kenya is like a few hours away, and it's much easier to navigate in Kenya than it is in Tanzania because they do speak English there. So you find more English speakers than in Tanzania. But I was able to meet more Tanzanian farmers in Morogoro, which is like the mid region, and the land there is fairly cheap, and there's a lot of opportunities there. But I have connections, but I also encourage, like, once we are able to connect, if you are interested, to actually go to Tanzania and see it for yourself, because it's a very interesting experience, because the Morogoro area is very rural, but it's a great opportunity for farming, and it's beautiful out there for sure.
Great. The next question, how do you view the efforts of President Traore in Burkina Faso to rid that country of French colonial institutions and rebuild/build local enterprises and institutions?
Yeah, that's me and one of my professors were talking about this a lot last semester as it was happening, and it's an exciting time to see something like that, because wow, just to think that not only is French colonialism still very much entrenched, which is also something I talk about in my book, but so much entrenched in the economy of African countries, but so most of the African nations, and especially like the British systems as well, are entrenched within their economic systems, where like over more than 50% of their makings of money go back to the bank there. So it's very exciting to see new leadership and these radical thoughts showing up, even if it doesn't meet where we want it to. It's just the concept of us reimagining what that looks like and where that can take us in the future, primarily for young people, right? Like, we want to have these types of narratives ringing in our ears to get it done, because it's going to happen eventually, right? And it is happening, and it's moving, and it's going to sweep across the continent, and you know, we're we're going to be on top. That's why it's so important to be traveling and investing in African nations as far as community building, like actually being involved locally and creating something new and reimagined with the people. So it's a very exciting time for that.
Okay, wonderful. Another attendee asked, what ideas do you have on what we can take as African people to change the story for ourselves, decolonize our lives in the simplest form?
Okay, is that question in the chat?
This is in the Q&A.
Okay, what ideas do you have where we can take as African people to change the story for ourselves, to decolonize our lives in the simplest form? Interesting. Okay, so my biggest thing is doing first, the concept is imagining that you can get it done, whatever it is that you see fit, of what that looks like, of being your higher being, because that's really what imagination allows for you to be, is your highest being, right? Being able to be your fullest self, right? Once you're able to utilize your imagination, because it's not dumbed down by systems, then it's naturally going to trigger you to want to take action and translate those ideas into action. And you can't do it by yourself. So once you have this frequency of thought, naturally you'll start bringing in people that you can resonate with and learn from, essentially. So I think it does start in the simplest form as reimagining and doing the work. And what does that look like? It looks like, for me, it looked like writing things down and planning, right? And then also reading, researching, learning, being involved. Like I couldn't have learned everything that I had learned if I wasn't involved within my government, going to board meetings, going to the ANC meetings, listening to the people, being engaged with the community around me. So I think that's really important as far as understanding your environment, like being socially and cognitively aware of what's happening around you, and being able to put yourself in the middle of it to create a solution, create a space where you can come together with people to start working in a way that you see fit, essentially, whatever that may be. And so for me, that was building the United Association of Moors. It was me documenting my experiences. It was me publishing my book and talking to you guys and sharing what I've learned, and coming from it from my perspective of saying, like, hey, we need to start reimagining and building this now together.
Great. But adding on that, what role do you see education playing in challenging and dismantling oppressive systems?
Yeah. So what I see, as far as, it's really interesting because I heard let me think. Molefi Ashanti talking at a seminar one time, and he was talking about how he's never seen an African university in Africa actually be an Afrocentric piece, like be something that's tailored towards the solutions of Africa and or its country, wherever it may be, because it has indoctrinated white systems of education, which is very much true in a lot of the systems that I witnessed as well. And also, we know that to be true in some ways in a lot of the HBCUs that we find. For instance, we know that Howard University is primarily funded by the government, and also was named after a white man from the Civil War. And we also know that Howard University funds gentrification in the neighborhood and doesn't give a lot to its students. So we have to think about developing education systems in a way that actually are educating our people to solve solutions to our problems in our communities, right? And so something that I had briefly mentioned before was food deserts. A lot of times we're living in neighborhoods that mostly are fast food, and there's not enough grocery stores. We need solutions on that. So that means, do we need do we need more like rappers, or do we need more farmers? And the answer is we need more farmers, and maybe you can rap and be a farmer, I don't know, but those are the things that we need. Do we need more I don't know, any basketball players, or do we need more educators? And the answer is we need more educators. And I don't mean educators as like going within the system. I mean us building our own schools again. Like, this is the route that we need to go. And it's already happening, right? You have a lot of people who are starting to do homeschooling, especially because of the different policies that have come out within education. So that is something that I do see that's going to become more prevalent, and something that's going to really shift our consciousness, is us being more attentive to what we are learning, what we are allowing to be put into our children's brains, by being selective as to where they are going to get their information and to interact in communities, essentially. And so that may look like, having a local person in your neighborhood that builds a curriculum, and having your child join that program because you've seen that curriculum, you trust that curriculum, and it actually attunes to what you want to instill within your child. And I think that's how we can radicalize people and get them to stop thinking in such oppressive ways. And also an engagement in international programs. And so ideally where I want to see my organization go in the future is being able to get young people on trips to be able to do these cultural immersion programs back and forth. Let's say I get 5 to 10 kids from DC to go to Ghana, and we're working on the farm at the University of Ghana. And then I get 10 kids from the University of Ghana to come back, and we're working on some food cooperative in DC. Like, that type of engagement is also very powerful and important as well, to immerse ourselves in each other's culture again.
All right. Cleveland asks, can you share your view of AI, artificial intelligence, on Afrocentric instincts?
Okay. I don't see that. Okay. Can I share my view on AI on Afrocentric instincts?
Yeah, so I would probably take that to mean like on the African imagination, what role might technology and AI play in that? Or what are your views on AI and African imaginations and reimaginations?
I think that AI, artificial intelligence, can be used as a tool, but nothing is better than our own minds and our brains, right? Like, the AI is just mimicking what our brains are able to do, and we're able to do fascinating things. So I think that there becomes a thin line between trusting AI too much, and then that also can dim our imagination. So it's a balance that you have to have with it. But also simultaneously, I am familiar with being able to generate images and from prompts and ideas, but that also has the side effect of taking from other people's work, essentially, and then meshing it together. So I think the ultimate thing that is great is being able to utilize your imagination as much as you can, because it is a powerful tool. And honestly, it's a great tracker of consciousness as well, I would say.
Okay,
But
we got a couple more questions before we close out, everyone. Gregory asked, are you encouraged with the response of young African American people with whom you've shared this information with? What has been the response, and what are your thoughts on the response that you're receiving from the youth?
that's interesting. Okay. I work with a lot of youth, and primarily for my program, I work with people from the ages, I would say 15 up to 24. And there's very few that I can get people to get it, right? But when I'm working with young people, my primary thing is that I'm planting a seed at least, right? Because that's what I remember being done to me at a young age. Someone had planted a seed of these great African inventors and African leaders and African organizers as a very young person. And then me having that seed in my heart and my mind, I was able to nourish it and water it and help it sprout and help it grow. And so that's what I hope to do, even if I don't get everyone with me. I hopefully I get like at least critical mass. For people in my age group, I do find some people who are interested in it and not so much that are doing that work, because we feel like we have to go through that rat race a lot of times. But hopefully with me engaging more people, I am able to bring along more and more youth. But I have found that a lot of youth in Ghana and Nigeria and Tanzania and Kenya, they want to do this work. They're interested. They want to see a change. They want to engage. They want something that actually speaks to building systems that are for them. So I would say that. And I think that just goes to show like complacency versus people who no longer want to be complacent.
Wonderful. And our final question, Anonymous wrote, thank you so much for your answer on the use of our imaginations as Africans. What books would you recommend we can start reading in our reimagining that you can share with us? So I guess what are some ways that we can begin to build our imaginations, including your book? What are some other books that you would recommend?
Goodness. I that is a really good question. But you know, something that really helped me as far as rethinking of my own thought process, I would say is Marimba Annie is a really good book to read. I'm sorry, I didn't name the book yet. Yurugu by Marimba Annie. It doesn't, she may speak on imagination specifically, but she's more so talking about the thought processes of mental slavery, us adopting Eurocentric thinking of our minds and how to understand that system and kind of shed away from that and start thinking through what that may look like, of reimagining who we are. But yeah, I mean, I love to read everything, anything, any thought that I have in my mind, I love to try to find more information on. So I read things on melanin that opened my mind a lot by Richard King, that was introduced to me by Dr. Greg Carr. That was a really fascinating book. Or another book on melanin by Edward Biome, and that gets into creative processes and the power of eumelanin within that makes up all of our bodies, like including all our organs and everything like that. So there's so many different areas. I would just say start, but also start journaling, right? And then I don't know if you have dreams, but my dreams are very vivid. Do a dream book, like start with what's happening inside and what comes up, and then documenting it, because the biggest thing is a lot of our imagination is just there. Like, think of it as when you're a child, like you have that imagination, so it's inherent. So I think the biggest thing is pulling it out of you naturally by spending time with yourself and writing and seeing what comes out of that, and asking questions and finding the answers to those questions, and keep following that trail.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sister Nakaja, for this wonderful presentation. We thank you, the audience. Please let our sister know how much we appreciate the wonderful information that was shared tonight and the great work that you're doing. A wonderful inspiration. I'm sure that many of us are really thinking about ways that we can continue to grow and build our imagination. Thank you for sharing some of those strategies tonight. I want to also thank the family for joining us this evening, and I want to invite you out to next month's Wisdom Wednesday. On March 20th, we will have Dr. Shantella Sherman, who will be speaking on the miseducation of Black children using 3D eugenic theories. So again, Dr. Shantella Sherman will be joining us on March 20th with the topic of the miseducation of Black children using 3D eugenic theories. Again, we invite you and encourage you to go to ikgculturalresourcecenter.com to learn more about IKG Wisdom Wednesdays, the Egypt on the Potomac field trips, and the 2024 study tour to Egypt. Before we do our final closing, I would like to ask Sister Nakaja if you have any closing remarks.
No, I do not. I'm just, thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored to have the pleasure to have this platform, and I'm excited to come next month to listen to that that book. That sounds very interesting. So thank you guys so much for asking your questions and engaging me. I had so much fun. I hope you guys do check out my book again, Play the Game, Hierarchical Assimilation. You can find it on my website, www.nkosi-a.com. Thank you guys so much again. Have a good night.
Yes, thank you. And again, her information was on the final slide, and you will be able to see a replay of this on our YouTube channel, IKG Cultural Resource Center on YouTube, and that will be up in a few days. So thank you all for coming out, and we will see you all next month. Thank you. And so, sis, before we close out, so everybody is sending their thanks.